Hey, a good day to you all. My name is Patrick Lovell. I am the producer of The Con, and I'm sending you a direct message to Americans Against Foreclosure and Americans for Justice. And I got off the phone yesterday with Ed Vallejo, and I've been in conversations off and on for a few years with Ed and many other people in this space, of course, trying to get information that I put in The Con and other things that I have on the sidelines for season two of the con. Which, if you know my story, you know that we haven't been able to get it off the ground because we've run into the same sort of dead ends and you know sabotages, if you will, that everyone finds themselves involved with in the courts. And I was going through. Well, first, yesterday when I was talking to Ed, Ed and I were definitely simpatico. I learned a lot about Ed that I didn't know before in terms of his front row seat to a lot of the the schemes and the fraud that took place at Countrywide as well as WAMU and and I'm not sure if there was another scenario, but he definitely was inside the belly of the beast as it came time to crunch foreclosures and all of the different methodologies and the schemes and lies and everything that led to him getting involved with putting these two groups together and everybody that's involved. And I think there's over 100,000, maybe 200,000 members of these different groups, and that's pretty damn substantial. But I wanted to comment on what it is that I'm bringing and what I'm trying to get us all on the same page to lock in unison, to walk in step in unison, in solidarity, is basically reflected in these two emails that I just happened to get earlier today. And one was by a name of a person whose name eludes me at the moment because unfortunately that email disappeared, and sometimes that frequently happens with these long email threads, at least on my end. But there was another email that came to me via Tom Kobler, who I've known for some time, both I think on the same thread, unless I'm confusing things. But the first person was talking about, I believe, PacWest Bank and some of the methodologies of the schemes inside the courts that had made this person's life absolute hell over the course of the last 10 years. And what he was attributing it to was the corruption in the courts and all the schemes that involved the servicers and the foreclosure mills and everybody involved with the process. And his last point was, we must all come together to rise above the noise, to elevate our truths so that we can create a movement. And I happened to respond and I said, do you know who I am? Do you know what I'm doing? And do you know what my work is? And do you know what I'm attempting to do? And that email thread just disappeared. So I'm not quite sure if that was because of something I did or it just disappeared for some other reason, but it definitely frames the importance of what it is that I'm trying to tell you and convey to you and get on the same page with you. But before I do that, I want to also comment on this last email that I saw from Tom Kibler. I've been familiar with Tom's story and I've kind of watched all of the horrific things that have kind of transpired throughout the years, and of course culminating this last few months. But one thing I want to address first and foremost is that he says that a lot of this has been revealed by Neil Garfield, and then he puts the link to livinglies.me, and then he goes on to talk about the horrific nature of his case and what he was involved with, and he gives us the backstory. But he gets down to this situation, which I thought was really interesting. I have fought this racketeering since 10/11 of 2012 regarding the forged assignment in the land records, slandering my title from that date. I've fended off a dozen or more unlawful foreclosure attempts since March 16th of 27, narrowly surviving a near-fatal stress-induced aortic dissection that required two emergency open heart surgeries and left me permanently disabled, and also dealing with complex PTSD. And I think he says earlier on in this email, and I'm trying to just browse through this real quick to find it because it's extremely powerful. And he says, look, a small army of from the Ramsey County deputy costumes pounded on my door, conducted a non-lawful home invasion. They threatened me by forcibly removed me. I'm a disabled senior. I was under threat, duress, and coercion from the home that I owned free and clear for 26 years, and they made me homeless. unbelievable, right? And I got a call earlier this week from somebody that's associated with Americans for foreclosure against foreclosure, and she was out of California, I think in Chino County, and she told me a story. She was a Mexican American woman. I could tell just from her story that she and her husband, I think he was an educator. She had worked in the restaurant industry, were hardworking people that apparently owned their house free and clear. I didn't know the details of everything, but apparently, in the aftermath of 2008, the same goons that are involved with all of these illegal foreclosures set them up and basically stole the home, and the attorneys that she hired were in on it. So, this has happened. I've got cases, as we all do, but examples from Bruce Jacobs in Miami, Florida, got stuff in Queens, New York from my friend Paris Fay and others. I know stuff all over the country based on things that I've seen from you guys, as well as just mountains of material from Ohio and Texas and California, most notably California. And going back to the initial comment in an email from this thread that disappeared from this person talking about PacWest Bank, in calling for a movement, I could not agree more. That's exactly what I'm doing. But you have to understand who it is that I am in this context. And it's not that I'm more important or more special than anybody else in this whole process. It's just that the con took literally millions upon millions of dollars to put together, that involves the top level people from the Department of Justice, the FBI, the SEC, and attorneys general from around the United States. We got the whole story. That story put together with all of the pieces of the puzzle in the order that it did reveals the crime that ultimately buried everybody else, that destroyed your lives, that led to this madness in the courts. Now, I've got 300 hours of material on the shelf that I hope to put into use, and there's a way that it's going to be done because it's not going to land on mainstream television. I've been a producer for over 20 years. I was repped by one of the biggest agencies in Hollywood with clients that have won many Academy Awards. There were a lockdown in my industry. When you get that sort of representation, you're in the club. But that wasn't enough for us. Not to mention the fact that you would think because my partner in this whole program was basically Wall Street royalty, that gave me the opportunity and the resources because I am a producer with a long track record. I've won many awards throughout my career, and he had all the trust in the world that I could figure this out. I wasn't an investigative journalist initially, but over years and years and years of effort, I became one. And as a result of the elements that we put in the con, it's the investigation that the Department of Justice never fulfilled. And I can tell you why. Now, the thing you've got to understand is that the entire system is in on this corruption. The whole world changed with the collapse of the housing collapse in 2008 and the global financial crisis and the collapse of the global financial system that was put in place after decades and decades that connected the world together, ultimately through our housing industry. That's where that was the largest consumer platform that led to securities, in volume in the entire world, and it blew up the world. And of course, our GSEs had been invested heavily by both China and Russia and Saudi Arabia and other, countries that have a lot of exorbitant wealth, a lot of it looted from their own countries, as a matter of fact. And then that's another interesting part of the story because it winds up in our GSEs and is guaranteed by the full faith and credit of the United States. But what I continue to illuminate and to show you, and I don't know how many of you out there percentage-wise have seen the con, but you've got to understand that unless and until the truths of what we reveal, and this doesn't put me in front of everybody else, except that I got the information, I put it together to where everybody can actually see and understand this, and I'm talking about the general population most notably. That includes the most credible of our system. We got the top whistleblowers from the C-suites at all of the major financial institutions that tell us exactly what happened. We built from the ground up the investigation through the entire process, through the brokers to the CDO managers at the top, but then everybody, the appraisers and the underwriters and everybody in between. We got testimony and evidence from every single one of them. And for us to go public with this information, because we name names, we've got CEOs in our work that we name names, most notably Jamie Dimon, that there's no way in hell we could have gone public with this information and not been sued to the gills, because, as you may well know, that the biggest banks in the country have also the biggest law firms in the country, and they could, destroy us with a lawsuit for libel if everything we said wasn't by the book, cross the T's, dot the I's, and make it bulletproof. But we never got mass distribution. And as some of you might understand, that because of technology, because of the what we're calling the intelligence industrial state, can basically suppress anything. And they suppressed this. The entire government of the United States circled the wagons, did a dog and pony show, smoke and mirrors scenario to hide what it is that we got in the con and that we proved, that then leads to just the disaster and the hell that everybody out there in these two groups are going through. And so we're running out of time. We're going to pull the con. It's been out there for 2 years. It hasn't been seen by millions of people. My partner, the guy who forked up the money to do this, which was $4 million, by the way, $4.5 million, he's going to pull it because it costs money to keep it on this platform and there's no demand for it. So what I'm in the process of is threefold. The first is we're passing around a petition for everyone who's gone through the foreclosure madness to not pull the con, because it validates everything you have gone through. It's the cord from your experience, even though it's not your specific personal story, it's what created what your story, what happened to you to create your story. And it puts all of the pieces together from the most notable people. And if it gets erased from history, if you think it's hard now to be able to get the public to understand what's going on in the courts so that we can smash this corruption that's destroyed everyone's lives, no chance. It's not going to happen. Again, the Department of Justice did a smoke and mirrors scenario where, along with Congress and everybody in government, where we had what was known as the Financial Crisis Inquiry Commission, where they laid out a lot of what we put in the con. In fact, a lot of information I got was from the Financial Crisis Inquiry Commission, but then it became a smoke and mirrors, kind of like the 9/11 Commission report. Basically, they ended up with over thousands of witnesses. It took over a year, and they got all of the aspects of what we show you in the con, but ultimately, they only created 11 criminal referrals, one of which just happens to be in the con. His name is Richard Bone, and he's the motherlode of the ultimate revelation, and he got suppressed by the system completely. And then ultimately, then we saw from that, we saw the mortgage settlements, the bank settlements, right? We had $250 billion in fines from all the too big to fail banks that the federal government put together these civil lawsuits and then led to settlements. And in the statement of facts and all of the other elements that are revealed in those lawsuits that are public information, all you have to do is go look them up. And most of those came through on 2014, 2015, 2016, I think was the last realm of them. But they have these maneuverings through what we call statement of facts and then non-deferment prosecutions, where the Department of Justice, and they basically sewed all this up before the 2016 election, as I recall, which is really interesting, all things considered, because of just what didn't happen in the aftermath through the Trump administration and where we are today, which was the Department of Justice said clearly that all of the crime that we show you in the con, much of which some of you know, that it was admitted by the government of what exactly happened. And they also say that this is a civil suit and that they left the door open for criminal lawsuits downstream, which of course never happened. We got the con, which puts it all together, which is $29 trillion bigger than Watergate, but in terms of what the government did, never happened. They just buried it, okay? And then, of course, we had the national mortgage settlement in 2012, and I think most of you are aware of what took place there, but that's all based on all of the stuff in the servicers and the foreclosure mills and what's going on with you. And it's 2023, and most of you have had your lives destroyed by this over the course of the last decade, the last 13 years, and it's still going on. As we see lay out, through Bruce Jacobs, who's basically paying for his life right now because he's in the crosshairs of the Florida bar through a corrupt Governor Ron DeSantis and everything that I've learned through Bruce Jacobs about how the courts in Florida were stacked with, complicit guys that were going to do exactly what you all know in the courts, which is corruption, absolute corruption. Now, the first thing I mentioned was, of course, the petition to sign. But the second thing is I would encourage all of you to, as quickly as you can, watch The Con. It's at www.thecon.tv. If you can't pay $10 to watch it on Apple Plus, which is a platform, of course, Apple TV, or Amazon Prime and Microsoft, and also Vimeo. Those are the four choices, but they're all available on the website, the links to them, and it's $10 to watch the whole thing. And it will tell you exactly what created why you went through what you went through. And it's the official record. And we're going to pull it from public view, and it's going to be erased from history. It's the one thing that, and I'll tell you, I watched this in one of the hearings with Bruce Jacobs, where he laid out a lot of what it is that I'm telling you, a lot of what we show in The Con, a lot of what he's been dealing with for the last 13 years. And he said, the judge said, look, Bruce, even if everything you were saying was true, I'd have to hear it from my government. Now, meanwhile, Bruce didn't have a comeback for that, and so they wouldn't allow discovery, and so they're railroading Bruce and his clients and everything that leads to. But, we got the government. And in fact, many of you in Americans Against Foreclosure and Americans for Justice, I see you frequently in these email threads talking about RICO. Do you understand that we found the only RICO conviction in the entire country? We know exactly how it works. We're not just believing and hype, just imagining we can prove racketeering. No, we proved racketeering. We found out exactly how they did it, which was exactly what should have happened with the FBI and the DOJ and the SEC. And did that happen? No. But do I have evidence that everybody at the top levels at the FBI and the DOJ said it should have happened and why it didn't? Yeah, it's in The Con. And so, for example, if the judge in that case that I just referenced based on Bruce Jacobs' case had seen The Con, and it was something that actually came through millions of people or on mainstream television, it was an accepted truth that, like we accept Watergate, for example, right? Then they'd be doing things differently in these hearings. They'd have to allow discovery. They'd have to acknowledge the documentation fabrication. They'd have to acknowledge the rights of assignments and everything else that goes with it, and all of the things that all of you have been completely bulldozed by. So I encourage you to watch The Con. So action item number 1 is sign the petition, please. Action item number 2 is to please watch The Con if you can. And if you can't, we've got free information at www.thecon.tv, where if you just go to the pull down menu that says video, I think we've got 30 what we call microdocs that basically paint the whole picture. But it's not nearly as effective as what we did in The Con, because The Con is the entire case. It's the entire presentation of what exactly happened that created the largest criminal conspiracy and cover-up in history, that is racketeering. That's all there is to it. And ultimately, the final piece of the equation is that because of everything I've done and I've learned, is that, look, the media is a giant lie. Nobody in media has a clue of how any of this stuff works. Nobody in media has a clue that because of what happened in 2008, it created the power system of our country, which is not a democracy. And for all of you Republicans who like to say it's a republic, yeah, sure. Okay, so it's a rule by the minority because of corruption. So you support that? We could debate that all day long, but the one commonplace that unites us all is the corruption that has destroyed the land records, your houses, your family, created these absolute terrorist scenarios of post-traumatic stress disorder and all of the rest of it. And many of you have valiantly tried to hold on as long as you can, and then you get you get thrown from your house and into the streets. It's absolutely horrific. And I'm honestly just disgusted and so sorry that it's happened to you. But we've got to unite, and it's not through Neil Garfield's situation. Neil Garfield is maybe trying to help people a specific way, okay, but that's, you got to pay thousands of dollars for his consult, and then you might win your house, you might not. If you do that, great, but that's not going to create the tidal wave populist crusade to purge corruption. It's not going to create the movement necessary to overcome this iron grip of corruption. Same with anything else, really, that's not, basically structured the way that I'm doing this, okay? And I know that a lot of you with Americans Against Foreclosure and Americans for Justice, you've got, pathways and strategies with bankruptcy. And from what I understand, that makes a whole lot of sense. But that's still not going to create a movement to purge corruption. And so what I've created is this, tidal wave crusade to purge corruption, where we are asking you to invest $13 in this movement. That's it, $13. Try to get 13 other people. If I can get 1,300, well, we're up down to about 1,246 now, additional contributors at $13 a piece, I can create a podcast to tell the stories that you guys are all going through, in addition to all of the other information I have. So if you contribute $13, we can get that going as soon as possible. And time is running out of the hourglass, because we're going to lose the con to history unless I can get 5,000 signatures plus. I think that's going to be what it's going to take to move my partner to think that people actually care about what happens, because from where he's sitting, nobody cares about the true story. The truth has no value. If you look around in society, the only thing that we're all buying are lies, and we're all victims of it. So the bottom line is, I've got the goddamn composite truth that if you, sign that petition, we might be able to get my partner to not pull it and find a different methodology to have it available for, anybody who's interested in it. And I'll work through that. But we got to show support for this. But if you come on board this initiative that I'm doing, I'll be able to create a podcast. But if I can get people outside of our world that didn't go through this, that are sick and tired of the corruption, that come from all manners of backgrounds, that are just tired of what's going on in this country, and if I can get 13 million of them to contribute $13, we're up to $169 million, where I have a war chest to be able to take this to the American people in a revival-like multimedia sort of presentation of everything that took place. That's how I want to show the 300 hours that I have on the shelf of everybody's story that got destroyed in the courts. And then I'll infuse it with what we have in our podcast and all of the other truths to try to rise this madness above the noise of deceit and lies, because Wall Street has absolute control. And I'm convinced they're involved with the CIA on this one and many other things. But that's why it's so difficult. They've got complete control of the government. The financial system spends billions of dollars, as do the multinationals and others, to own the system, where they've got complete corruption in the courts, complete corruption in Congress, and then, of course, everything that we're dealing with. And they get to loot trillions of dollars, which is a small, like, if there's 1,000 billion and a trillion, it's pennies on the dollar investment, and the biggest ROI is corruption. For them to have complete control, and so to destroy you guys in your horrific scenarios that it's just like, it's a nightmare. It's beyond any science fiction movie any of us have ever seen. And so those are the three things, right? And if we do that as soon as possible, then we're going to make some shit happen. And we're the only ones who are going to do it. And I'll finish off with this. Some of you are like, hey, reach out to Matt Taibbi. Taibbi's not going to do the story. And then some of you are like, reach out to David Dayen. David Dayen's not going to do the story. David Dayen already did the story, which many of you have probably already read, which is called Chain of Title, which I've since learned is really Chain of Lien Title. But the bottom line is that he's moved on. I mean, he talks about it every once in a while, but nobody's putting the entire picture together. Nobody. I am. And I'm also dealing with two mega scenarios. One is a huge journalistic outfit called the ICIJ, who they worked with. They created the Panama Papers, the FinCEN files, which is deeply embedded in what's going on right now with Epstein and Chase, for example, and many other things. And they're going to give us 100 reporters to tell the story, and I'm going to be leading them to all of the right things. I'm the vector to that. I'm the one making it happen. And then in addition to that, I'm dealing with the A-list celebrity and other stuff on Netflix, to where hopefully I'm going to be able to get this entire story on one of those eventually. But what we got to do is we've got to move the needle for a groundswell of people, so that the people, the gatekeepers up top, are like, oh, people are paying attention to this. Oh, there's a market. Oh, people might want to see it. Okay, let's give them what they want, because that's the way it works in media. And that's what's going on. So again, thank you for listening. I'm so sorry for everything that you guys have had to encounter, but this is the pathway forward. And I know we can do it together if we come together. It's not about me. It's you plus me equals we the people. And I've got all of the information. And if you ask yourself, well, Patrick, what did you put into this? I got $4.5 million into this. $4.5 million would mean 347,000 $13 contributions. It's pretty significant, plus tens of thousands of hours. And I lost my family for this. I lost everything. I can't tell you how many times I was on the verge of suicide as a result of having this immense pressure like you guys have experienced in the courts where there's no way out. And they're crushing us just simply by lying. We've got to elevate the truth. This isn't rocket science, it's racketeering. When you have the truth, you're bulletproof. And I've got the answers, man. And it fits in simpatico with everything you guys are trying to do. So please consider investing $13. The quicker I get to $20,000, which is $1,300, it's $19,900, 1,300 contributors, then I've got this podcast that I can do for a couple of months until I raise more money. But I'd like to get, to 150,000 to 200,000, 300,000, maybe a couple of million, because once I get the momentum, then we can get a populist surge. And what do I have in addition to having put $4.5 million into this and all the top credibility from the FBI, the DOJ, the SEC, and everything else? What I found was the ultimate revelation. It's the Ark of the Covenant. It's the Holy Grail of everything that we're talking about. I found that the Federal Reserve used Federal Reserve Act 13.3 as the lender of last resort capacity to provide $29 trillion illegally to the bankrupt financial system that destroyed everybody's lives, and they got free money from the Fed to basically destroy your life in the courts. That's how it works. And there's a lot of variances of that, but that's the basic construct of the whole thing. And we can rug pull them like they rug pulled us. But the only way we can do it is if there's millions of us together. Can I get 1,300 of you guys to join immediately? That's what it's going to take. And the sand in the hourglass is running out because we're going to pull the con June 30th. It's bye-bye from history. And I shouldn't say we. I'm not even talking to my partner. I got this from my distributor. I'm so pissed off he's pulling it off. But I'm doing this to try to, pressure him to let him know that people actually care about the truth and understand that our work can actually pave the way for everybody's redemption. I know what everybody thinks. It's like, what's in it for me? I got to win in the courts. You're not going to win in the courts until millions of us come together and we expose the corruption. Then people have got a shot. Now, I know people will win every once in a while based on all of these different techniques that you guys have, but if all of this stuff moves in concert together, that's how it's going to happen. So to the first person that talked about Pac West Bank and how we got to come together, we've got a movement ready to go right now. All we're missing is you. Thanks for listening. Rise, roar, revolt. Failure is not an option. Onwards and upwards.